Hello everyone and welcome to the second careers webinar of the From Foal to Race programme. I'm going to be joined today by Lorna Fowler. My name is Amy and I'm the Education Officer for Agri Aware. So Lorna is a racehorse trainer and the co-owner and operator of Rainston, which is a stud farm and training yard in County Meath. Rainston has been producing racehorses for over 60 years from some of the finest land in Ireland. Lorna has also spent time as a TV presenter. Some of you may recognise Lorna from the Breaking In video that features in the Making a Racehorse chapter in the Foal to Race programme. So I'm going to welcome Lorna now. So thanks a million for joining us, Lorna. Nice to have you. First of all, I would just like to know a little bit more about your education pathway into your current career, or if you want to give us a general introduction to yourself too, that's perfectly fine.
Well, I suppose, lovely to join everybody here and great to be doing this, first of all. I suppose my career path was always going to be horses, very much by choice, in that I grew up into a racing family. My mother trained racehorses. My father was very involved, rode as an amateur. I rode as an amateur. My brother did, and then he turned professional and rode as a professional jockey. And then I actually, I thought, gosh, between school and university, I thought, gosh, let's try something different. And but I just kept going back to horses all the time. So I've always been very hands-on with them. And then it was very much a career path I chose to get into the media, funny enough. So I was still riding as an amateur at the time, but I very much, I didn't drift into it. I very much targeted it. And I started it through written journalism and then radio and then telly. So I always mixed it up. There were, of course, you're freelance. So, there's tough times and then there's better times, like with a lot of things. And then I did that, for a long time. Did a lot of really, really great jobs in the media. I did a lot of stuff abroad as well. So I worked for Racing TV. Before that, I worked for At the Races. I did Timeform Radio. I did a bit of 5 Live. And I was also living in Newmarket for a lot of the time. So I was very much involved with what was going on there and doing a lot of interviews with trainers and stable visits and stuff. So I was very much in the media side, but also fully involved with the horses. So I loved all of that. And then I moved to Ireland 10 years ago with my husband, who's originally from Ireland. And I mean, to be honest with you, I've always loved the training of racehorses, but I very much said it's not a career path I'm going to choose because, financially it's hard work. And I always wanted to be in racing, but I sort of talked myself out of it. And then when we moved back to Ireland, I was pregnant. Then I had Rosie a few months later. And then we just got really busy on the farm and the media work sort of just fell away a bit, really because of me. I was turning work down because we were busy with the horse here. And then Harry's mother, who held the training license after his father died. So basically she had the training license and then she died just about a year after I was here. And so I took over the license and then we just did lots more. I remember us saying to the head man, who's been here for 30 years, worked for Harry's grandfather, Harry's father, Harry's mother, and now us. And we said, oh, we're going to downscale. I mean, we're going to have 10 horses on the place and we'll rent it out. And anyway, here we are 9 years later, and we have best part of 85 horses on the farm. So that went well.
Yeah, so a lot of evolution throughout your career. I had described you as a TV presenter, but I guess it was much wider scale media in general. Actually, if we just go back to you taking over the training license, so what was involved in that, or what did you have to do to take it over, or was it just maybe
it was an unusual situation in that I think from when I came over, I think by default, just interested. I just love the racehorses and that's what I enjoy, and I enjoy racing. So involved, when Harry's mother was alive, obviously, and that was also was having a child as well. But so I knew what was going on. And then, I think there was no big transition, and there were horses that needed to run, and I basically was granted the license. They were very good to us. And normally you do your trainers courses, and then you go to the panel, and then you're granted your license. But with us, they gave the license, and then we did that. But then, of course, I still had to go back and do the various modules, and then go from there to get the license after that. So it was a very unusual handover. I mean, I've always been involved. I've worked in a lot of yards in many ways. I obviously, my mother trained in Scotland, so I was there, and then I worked for trainers in France, trainers in South Africa, really because I was more interested in the riding at that point. But I had a lot of experience in different places, and so it was an unusual one. And I took over when we only had 1 or 2 horses. But sometimes you're just taken a route that I don't know whether you choose it unconsciously or not, but it just sort of happened. And I love training racehorses. I mean, it brings a lot of hardship, of course it does, but I love it, and that's really all there is to it.
Absolutely. How long did the process of getting your license take? How long does something like that take?
It depends. For people that are looking to take out their license, I think you have to have, I can't remember if you actually need referees, but you certainly have to have experience. But it is, you do your modules, which is a sort of trainer's course. I think we did it over 2 weeks, several days over 2 weeks. But I think anyone aspiring to be a trainer, I think the more time you spend you want to do good long stints in a few different places. You want to just get as much experience as you can. You don't need to be here, there, and everywhere, but you definitely want to have a little bit of experience of of different kind of yards. The one thing I do think actually I personally think is very important, and I think it would stand anyone looking to train horses in good stead, is to have experience in a smaller yard, because you can go to the bigger places, the bigger yards, really big operations, and of course you're going to learn a huge amount, but you see how everything's done very well at a high end, I suppose. And I think it's also important to experience trainers operating on a smaller scale, where I suppose everything is much more hands-on, people having to do a lot more different jobs rather than just sort of in one role. And I think it's really important to see that.
Absolutely. Yeah, to get as much experience as you can,
Definitely hugely important.
And the other half of the operation at Raiston is a stud farm. You yourself, you'd have a lot to do with that, I'm sure, as well.
Very much so. I mean, we took over when we I mean, it has been an unusual situation. So that the farm started off when, well, I suppose it's been in the Fowler family for several generations, and it was hunting horses here sort of 5 generations ago. And then Harry's grandfather, Brigadier Fowler, he was Jessica Harrington's father. So Jessica grew up here, and her brother was John, who's Harry's father. So he was the one that sort of brought racehorses here, and started with pointers, and that's kind of how it started. But then they always had, from him through to Harry's parents, there were always broodmares on the farm, and they were breeding. It's always been a big part is the breeding. So John trained very successfully here through the 80s, the 90s, into the early noughties, or through the noughties, I should say, really. But there were always mares on the farm. There was always young stock. So the training was a big operation then, really. I mean, I say big, that was a time when I think he probably had sort of 20 horses in training, but the big battalions of the Willie Mullins numbers, Gordon Elliott's, they weren't around then. So John was he was a big trainer back then. And then Chich took over the license, and they still had several horses in training, and again there were still the mares on the farm and the stock on the farm. And then I suppose when Harry came back and we had to really make you had to make things work. We had to bring in business. We had to go forward. We were sort of kind of on our own. We needed to make it work. And we got incredibly good support from a lot of people, particularly Alex Frost. He bought into mares with Harry, and he bought into some very good mares. I think, Dalamine would be the most important one, who is the dam of politesse and naughtiness, and also Don Poli, who was not with us, but that was, she's an exceptional broodmare. So, we had really good support, and also existing clients, Valerie Cooper and Diana Cooper, her daughter, they've kept horses here, Tom Bruton also. So we've had incredibly loyal people that have stuck with us. And I suppose the farm, now it has got a lot bigger, and there are quite a lot of brood mares. And we also have new clients which have mares on the farm, which basically stay here, and they have their progeny, they have their foals here, and then they stay, and then we'll go to the sales, or they'll go into training. Mm-hmm. So in some ways we have a slightly unusual model in that, we have from in keeping with the seminar, from foal through to racehorse. And it is unusual in many ways to have it all on one place on the scale we have it, but we have a really big farm, so we have room. And what's happened probably more now in the last few years is that, now we have the racehorses are separate. They have the barn, their own barn, and they, it's become, same place, but sort of different operation. But of course, I'm still very much involved with the stud side of things and interested in it with the young stock. But Harry, my husband, he's very much been a salesman through and through for many years. And, he's very good with all the young stock and deciding who the mares are going to and working with the clients on that. So we sort of have a good system where obviously I'm very much more at the racing end, but interested in it all. And Harry, who is, he works full-time for Goss, but is of course very much at the helm of the stud side of things. And, and it's exciting. It's exciting to get, we have a lot of lovely mares on the farm for ourselves, for other people. And, he helps with all the mating plans for them and, liaises with that. So it's a lot going on, but I suppose, we keep the different operations separate, but in one place.
Sounds like, yeah, like you said, a good system, a good team. So there's a lot going on. So for you yourself, what would a day in the life of Lorna Fowler look like?
Oh goodness, every day is a different day. That is for sure. I suppose. I mean, I get up and I feed all the horses. So I feed all the racehorses in the barn. I feed all the other horses who are in, and I like that because no one's around. My children are asleep. My husband's asleep. There's nobody in. So it's just me and my horses. So I'm really happy. And it just gives me a chance to think about each horse, and it's the best time for me to spend with them before the day gets busy. And then I have to get my children organized to get to school and get them up. And that is quite a job. So then they're gone. I drop them off for someone to take them to school before 9. And then totally depends on the day, but I can ride. I sort of ride up to 3 lots. I don't really like riding more than 3 lots, so I try and avoid it. If I have the jockeys in, it's a schooling morning or a work morning, I tend to, it's great. I can step back and watch, and so I do less of that. I don't school at all anymore, but I ride less work. But I still like riding work now and again. And then, and then we're sort of into lunchtime, and then who knows what the afternoon brings. There's always vets around, and there's, now obviously we have a lot of owners coming in, which is great. That's exactly what we want to see, owners coming up to see their horses and enjoy them. Or it could be racing, or there could be a lot of things going on. So that sort of takes me through, and then then we get the children back, and now we're into the time where there's a lot of stuff going on, soccer, and there's football. And then we sort of put things together for the next day. In the evening, I put things together for the next day, what the horses are going to do, and then there's just a lot of things going on. So and then we do a lot of, the mares go for covers. I probably do less of that now because I have less time for that now, but we have, Harry does it sometimes, and otherwise we'll, we have people who can do the driving for us. So yeah, this is probably our busiest time, spring, because the racehorses are flat out, and then the mares, they're flat out getting covered and all the rest of it, and having we send the mares away for foaling though, so we don't foal them here. So this is kind of March and April are, I think, probably our busiest months, really.
Yeah, makes sense. It's that time of year, I think, for farms around the country in general, no matter what type. And we just actually have a question coming in here. So a pupil has asked, what is your favorite part about your job? So I guess that could be anything. You can pick.
My favorite part, and funny enough, it's not something that happens all the time, but when you have a horse who you're training a horse and you're building it up, and it might be earlier on when you start working them, or it might be a bit later, but sometimes you'll see a horse go up the gallop and it'll just, you can't really put your finger on it, but it does something and it gives you such a buzz because they're special. And that gives me a real kick, but that doesn't happen very often. But I enjoy getting to the point where you just know the horses are, ready to go. I love that. There's a lot about the job I do love. There's definitely a lot about it that's hard work. It's tough when horses, your little things can be big problems, and sometimes you have a lot of delays, and that's very hard. When the owners want their horses out, and you just have to do what's right for the horse, which ultimately is right for the owner. So you've got to sit tight and wait. But I do enjoy this time of year, particularly with the fillies, because the minute they get a bit of spring in the air and a bit of sun on their backs, you just see them blossom. And not just the fillies, the boys too, but I think it's more noticeable with the fillies. And you just see them, their skin is shining, and they're misbehaving, which is good in some ways, but it's a great time of year.
Brilliant. We just have one more question here, I think, from a pupil, and hopefully you'll be able to answer this. What is the best horse that you've ever had or ridden?
I tell you who gave me, since I've been training here, the horse that's really, I feel, gave me so much pleasure, and Politesse. She was bred by Alex Frost and my husband Harry, and she's just beautiful. And I actually did ride her work. It was 3 years ago, and I took her to the Curragh, and that was one of those, that probably is the best moment I have had with a horse without winning. Like, she was just the best moment ever. She was electric. She was incredible. And I knew then that, she was going to be something special. So, for me, she's the one that I suppose took us to a next level. And she was amazing. And so from that point of view, she's probably not the best horse I've trained. Obviously, Colonel Mustard, he's doing great stuff for us, and I have some really exciting one coming through. But for me, she's a little bit special in that way. When I rode as an amateur, I rode a lot of lovely horses. Musket Shot was always my favourite, because I actually started sort of eventing him because I was only 15 at the time, and then my mother sort of got a hold of him and put him in a few races, and he did pretty well. And then I rode him in a few races. As soon as I turned 16, I rode him on the flat, I rode him over hurdles, I rode him over fences, and won on him. So he was always a bit special. He was no superstar, but he was just a bit special to me. So those are sort of two in completely different ways, were really fabulous.
Perfect. Thanks so much for answering that. So we have a question coming in from Lauren. So she says she's 16 and she's wondering where to go or what to do if she wants to get experience with training horses. And I know you've answered a little bit about this at the start, but is there any kind of anywhere you would recommend, or anyone you know who's maybe looking?
It depends where she's based, but I think definitely start local. That's absolutely your best bet. And I presume Lauren is still, she's 16. I presume she's still at school or not.
I would imagine so. So yeah. I would imagine she's in TY. This program is for TY students, so I'd imagine she's in TY. She might get back to us.
Yeah, find. If I know who she is, I can help who the local trainers are. But we have quite a lot of girls here in school, and they come in to help out on Saturdays, and then they help out in TY a bit. So it's really important to give people a chance. They've got to work hard, though. I think it's important to remember that. But I think her best bet is to definitely find a local trainer and just start slowly and say, can I come in on a Saturday morning and give a hand? And don't expect to be, keep your expectations low as to your, to what you're doing. There's going to be brushing horses, mucking out, sweeping. And, then I don't know what her riding ability is, but, I think trainers will respect you if you work hard at the other stuff before the riding comes in. But I think, start local and then sort of see where that takes you from there.
Perfect. I would imagine she'd probably be happy to be involved in any of that mucking out. You got to start somewhere. So Lauren has just replied, she's based in Louth. So Lauren,
based in Louth.
Can...
I can't actually think, but I'm not sure who would be in Louth. There will be some. I can't think of any offhand, which is not very helpful of me. But maybe I can email you if I think about it. You can get back to Lauren. But Louth's not very far from Meath, so it's just for accessibility to get there. I can't think of anyone straight off.
No, that's great advice. So just get in touch with a local trainer, see who you can find, and see if anybody is interested in taking you on. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, great.
I guess I'll just put out one more call for questions there for any of our participants. And while I put out that last call, I might just say thank you to Lorna. Thanks a million for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure. And like you said, your own career roles from being a trainer and honest a stud farm, you really do kind of encapsulate that whole story from foal to race. So it was a very perfect match.
Yeah. Well, no, a pleasure to come on and and answer any questions. So a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everyone appears to be happy. So if no one has any additional questions, we can sign off now. Again, thanks a million, Lorna, and to everybody out there who's participating. Thanks again for joining us for the careers webinar for From Foal to Race. I hope you're enjoying the program, and details have been sent out to your teachers on how you can submit your project. So hopefully you're all working away on them, or if not, you're working through all of the chapters. And make sure to check out the Breaking In video that is part of the Making a Racehorse chapter, because it features Lorna and her experience as a horse trainer. So that is it for this evening. Lovely to see you all, and I'll see you again soon at the next careers webinar. Thanks again, Lorna.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.